Hi everyone, in this video let's take a look at how we can actually deploy our Node.js applications on a Kubernetes cluster. So let's get started. So to start, let's create a folder for our application. So I'm just going to create let's say node cube folder. So I'm just going to go into that folder. Alright, so let's actually kickstart a very simple Node.js application. So I'm just going to put npm init-y, which will just initialize the package JSON file. Let's install Express and save it. So insert this. That's great. So now let's actually do a very simple Express server. Right. So here I'm just going to put const express require express. Alright, so now I'm going to put const app equals to express, create an instance of it. Now we're going to define a route, very simple hello world route, which takes in a request and a response, and it gives back let's say it says so this should be sending rest.send, let's say hello world node cube, right? So this would just send back this string, and let's close this here. All right. Okay, now just app.listen. It will listen on port 3000, and it will just console.log saying server started on port 3000. Okay, so this. Alright, so this is great. Let's save this and let's try and run this. Perfect. So it says server started on port 3000. Let's do a quick check. So I'm going to go to localhost 3000, and perfect. It says hello world node cube. So that means our application is running. Now let's do a very quick Dockerizing of our Node.js application. To do that, let's vim this Docker file. And I've already defined some Docker file beforehand. I'm just going to paste that here. So to just explain this very quickly, we are going to use this node 13 image. We're going to set the working directory /app. We're going to copy all the package.json, which defines all our dependencies, and the log.json, and we can run this installation of all the dependencies. The -- production flag will help us to ignore all the dev dependencies. And then I'm going to copy all these files, and I'm going to expose port 3000, and I'm going to run this command node index.js, which kickstarts the application. Very simple Docker file. So write it out. So once this is done, what we're going to do is to build the image for this. I'm going to say docker build ht, and then put your Docker hub ID. All right. So if you don't already have a Docker hub ID, you can go to hub.docker.com, sign up for an account. My username is Harish v7, and you will find the same username that you can use for this tutorial. So I'm just going to call this node cube because that's my application name. Build this, and oops, I need to specify where is the Docker file, so I'm going to specify dot, which means it's in the present working directory. So it's building the image. You can see all the progress is here. And nice. And now that is done, we're going to say docker run -rm -p -d -p expose 3000 as 3000, and the image that we just built, which is Harish v7 node cube. Perfect. So this is running. Docker PSA would list our images. We would see that there is this. So we would see that Docker application is running. To verify, we can go back to our localhost and enter. Yep. So if you refresh this, it will still say hello world node cube. Perfect. So that's running, and our job now is to actually create a Kubernetes cluster. So let's focus on that. So first thing, let's actually stop this. So I'm going to stop this container, and what we're going to do is now to actually install some of the tools that we need to do the Kubernetes deployment. So if you go into this guide, so if you go into this guide, which is, you can find it on kubernetes.io in the reference, and if you go into the kubectl overview, right, so you will need this command line tool to actually help us to run Kubernetes clusters. So the kubectl command to line tool lets you control Kubernetes clusters. So you would need to install this Kubernetes tool chain here. So depending on the OS, get it installed, and that will help us with the deployment. So that is one. Number two, what we are going to do is to create a project on Google Cloud. So I already have that opened here. So I've already created a project called Node.js. So you can do the same. So if you actually come into this dashboard, you can click on this and see all the projects you have. Click on new project and get that set up. And very important, what we need is this project ID. All right, so keep note of this project ID. So now the project is created, we would need some GCloud command line tools. So for that, we need to go to this URL, which is cloud.google.com/sdk/docs/install. Okay, so this will actually help us to install the GCloud util. All this is required because we would be creating a Kubernetes cluster on Google Cloud, right? So for me, it's Mac OS. This is the package I need to download. So similarly, follow this and then go into that folder, unzip the folder, go into the folder and run this command, and followed by this init command, right? So that would get you set up with all the required prerequisites. So once that is done, you can come back here to our terminal. First thing, check if you have GCloud. So you can type GCloud auth login. So log into GCloud with your SDK. So once you do that, be sure to actually log in with GCloud auth login. So this will prompt you to choose one of your Google accounts and log in to your Google Cloud account, right? So that it will be. So once that is complete, the next step is to configure what project we are working on. So GCloud config set project, and then we need to give it the project ID. So let's go back into our Google Cloud dashboard. You'll see the project ID here. So mine is NodeCube and this number here. Copy that, paste it here, and press enter. This will actually update all the properties in our Google Cloud config, right? So perfect. Now that is ready. Now we have more things to do. One is to create a Kubernetes cluster here first. So here you would see something called Kubernetes engine and then clusters. Click on that. And once you reach this, click on create. So just choose the standard GKE and press configure. And just leave all this as default and just create this cluster, right? All right, so this cluster creation would take a few seconds or minutes. So let that complete. So do note that there might be some pop-ups which say you need to set up billing and stuff. So yeah, so to use this, you would need a billing account. So you would need to set that up. Probably need to add some payment mode, etc. So once that is done, you'll be able to create the cluster. So pause the video here and let this complete first. Alright, so now our Kubernetes cluster is actually created. We can see the cluster name, the location, how many nodes we have, and the total number of virtual CPUs we have been allocated, memory, etc. So let's see. So now let's jump back into a terminal, and we are going to actually check if we can see these containers here. So to do that, we need to say GCloud container clusters and then just list them. Okay, so this would actually list all the clusters that's running. Perfect. And let's actually get the credentials for the clusters so that we can do some operations on that. So GCloud container clusters, and then we would say get credentials, and we would give in the cluster's name, which is cluster 1, and we need to specify the zone. So dash dash zone is the flag, and specify US central 1 dash C. Right, press enter. Sorry, that's a spelling mistake, so this should be right. So perfect. So it says fetching all the endpoint and auth data, so entry is generated for cluster 1. Perfect. So that is done, and what we're going to do is to actually now firstly push our Docker image into Docker Hub, and then tell our Kubernetes clusters to use that deployed or pushed Docker image. Right. So if you go back into Docker Hub, remember you created a user ID. The next step is to create a repository here. Okay, so create a repository, and then I'm just going to call this node cube, and public repository is fine. I'm going to create this. So once I created this, what I need to do is, because I already built the image, I'm just going to put docker push Harish v7 is my username, and then put this repository, which is node cube, and I'm going to do a push on that. Perfect. So now that our Docker push is done, if you actually refresh this page, you would see that it's updated. So if you refresh this page, you would see there's a tag called latest, and it was just pushed a few seconds ago. So the OS used everything is perfect. Our image is ready. Now what we can do here is to say that you can use the kubectl to help us with this deployment now. Create a deployment. So create deployment. The image that you need to use is located at Harish v7 node dash cube. Right, so this is the image you need to use, and I'm going to call this node cube. This is the deployment that you need to do, so press enter. Perfect. So this deployment has, which we named as node cube here, has been created. So that's great. Now what we're going to do is to scale our deployment, which is done by kubectl scale deployment, and our application name and the number of replicas that we want. So I want 3 replicas. I'm going to put that as 3. So this is scaled. Next, what we need to do is to expose this deployment. So kubectl expose deployment node cube -- type. Here we can use node port first, and the port given is 3000. So press enter. So this would expose the service. Now let's go ahead and say get services. Now we can see that our we have node cube, which is a node port type that is running, and it has this 3000 port which is mapped. Right, so that is great. Now we have the services. Next, what we're going to do is see the nodes. So kubectl get nodes -o wide. Perfect. So if we actually look at this, we can see there is 3 different nodes that we have, right? So perfect. So now let's edit this, right? To say kubectl, edit our service, node cube. Okay, perfect. So this is the config file that we have. So what we are going to do is two things. One, actually let's change the port to port 80 so that we don't need to keep defining the port 80. So by default it will serve this, right? So next we will actually define the type to change this to load balancer. So this helps us to actually it works great with the service because it is able to control the exact port it wants to use. But it can get a bit expensive if you use this type because each service will get its own load balancer and external IP. But for production deployments, this is the best way to go, right? So once we have defined this, just exit this. Sorry, exit this window with write and quit. So that's written and this has been edited. Now let's verify that this is updated successfully. So say get service, and you can see the external IP is now pending. So it's actually updating our cluster deployment, and the external IP is still pending. So let's wait for the external IP to be generated. All right, so we have our external IP now, so we can copy this, and if we go into our browser and paste this IP, and there it is, our Node.js application is now deployed on Kubernetes cluster, and we are able to access it via our public IP. So yeah, so that's how we can do a Node.js production ready deployment on Kubernetes. So if you were just following this video for tutorial purpose, then do remember to delete your cluster after you're done playing with them, because these are all build usages and there might be a required payment for you to use these kind of services. And these are pretty heavy services, which is to have a Kubernetes cluster, and all these resources, they do cost a bit. So do remember to click on delete so that you can delete this cluster. All right, so that's all. So we saw how we can actually create a quick Node.js application, and how we can actually do a Docker image build, and then we push that Docker image to Docker Hub, and then we actually created a Kubernetes cluster, and then we finally did a Kubernetes deployment from our command line using this kubectl and GCloud toolchains. So now our application is live on this internet with a public IP. All right, so this is how we can do a production ready Kubernetes deployment for Node.js applications. So I hope this video is really useful for you, and if you found it useful, do give me a like and do subscribe to the channel for more upcoming content. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.